Hey everybody, good afternoon. My name is Eric Clark, and some of you have received a personal invite from me on your calendars to attend this event today, Your Success, That's Why, and how to leverage technology for growth. This is a free webinar, obviously, and we're happy to have you. We're going to get into a couple of things here, and just some housekeeping before we get totally rolling. There might be a few more people entering the room, but if you want to grab a drink or use the restroom or whatever you need to do, now is the time as we get rolling here. So one of the questions I wanted to answer is, why are you here? Why are you on this webinar today? Wanted to just be very forthcoming and candid. So for me, at least in our marketing team, we've identified your companies as some of the companies that we think we could really help, and we wanted the opportunity to share more about SWICKtech in hopes to learn more about your business at some other point in time after this webinar. We work with several companies that are similar, whether in the vertical or industry and/or size and practices, and we've helped them exceed their growth goals by leveraging technology, and wanted to, again, just provide an opportunity to educate you guys about who SWICKtech is. Before I get totally into the presentation, I wanted to talk about who I am a little bit, just to kind of unpack that and why I like technology and why I think it's important. So there's an interesting story here, and the picture is, it looks like I have antlers, but I don't. It's in my podcast studio. I am the client success associate here at SWICKtech, so I sit in an outside sales seat. I help with marketing and account management. However, I'm also the founder of a tech startup in the outdoor industry, and had gone through an incubator this past January. But if I rewind quite a bit further back to 2008, I used to be in technology back then, and had since, pursued a different career in marketing and graphic design. And in between then and where I'm at now with SWICKtech, I had this crazy idea to start an app or build an app. And in the 2008 kind of ecosystem, right in between all that, it was, the question was posed to me, Eric, we can build this application for you, but where should it live? And it was interesting because I didn't think of that. And it was all on-premise servers back then. And even virtualization was kind of this interesting kind of paradigm to try to understand and grasp. That's something that we, that's old technology now to a degree. But at the time when I was launching this app, it was either build a server in my apartment at the time. I was a full-time college student and working full-time. And the capital to do that would have been, north of $50,000 for what I needed. And that wasn't something I could do. So what ended up happening instead is we lit up an instance in Amazon Web Services, which is Amazon's cloud offering. And we built a data center in Amazon's web service, and I was able to build this app in the cloud. And, it's evolved quite a bit since 2013, 2014 was when it was being built. It's now kind of an enterprise grade system, but there's still businesses today that are leveraging this older model, which is okay. Some things are meant to be on premise. If it's a really heavy ERP system or something, there could be a case for that being in the building and being really close to operations. But there's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be. Your files, your Active Directory, your domain controller, a lot of these other things can be shifted into a cloud environment. And the capabilities that you get by going that direction are far greater than what you get on premise for the same amount of money. And so no new money is really being invested in on-premise solutions. It's all going towards the cloud. So a little bit of my background and history with some of that stuff, and at least my perspective on technology from that small little microcosm, and a neat look into a little bit older photo of my podcast studio, but one that I could dig up anyways. So insofar as what we're talking about today, obviously I wanted to tell you what we're going to cover, but we are going to spend a small amount of time talking about SWICKtech. So we'll, self-deprecate a little bit here, and why we're proud of some of the accomplishments that we do have. But essentially, we want you to get to know us and trust us maybe a little bit more. And I'm going to spend some time talking about the rate of change of technology, which will be brief. And then the majority of the session today will be talking about some success stories and anecdotes from other clients that we've worked with around various scenarios. And then looking at, at the end of this, as you sit through this, what can we do to kind of sweeten the pot for SWICKtech if you were to consider doing business with us. So if you stay to the end, we'll kind of unveil what that looks like for everybody that's in the room. So who is SWICKtech? I miss these folks quite a bit, seeing them on a day-to-day in person. However, we do weekly stand-up meetings now virtually, and I get to see all their faces anyways. We're about 30 people now, and we are centrally located in New Berlin, albeit we are working virtually, and there are a few folks at the office following some of the guidelines for COVID and such. But about half of the folks at SWICKtech are technical in nature, and the other half are administrative, marketing, account management, leadership, HR, etc. And of the technical folks, if we split that into two categories, we have support services and professional services. So support services is like the help desk folks, tier 1, 2, 3 support, where they're taking a lot of the calls from your end users and employees to deal with some of the routine day-to-day stuff that they might be having issues with their endpoints and workstations. And then the engineers and the professional services team, those folks are highly certified in Microsoft, Cisco, Dell, through a lot of our partner channels that we have, and have a lot of expertise and experience in deep disciplines of IT. That does extend itself all the way from SQL database to DevOps and a lot of the networking stuff that gets really deep very quick. But so that's a little bit about who we are in terms of the people and our core values. I'll touch on just quickly here because you can read the screen obviously, but we sincerely do believe in developing relationships. A little note about that is we have something called the surprise and delight budget that lives in our marketing budget. And as I get to know folks and our account management team gets to know folks, our point of contacts, we listen intently and we jot things down in our CRM. And I learned that one of our clients likes to fish and he had never caught a muskie, and he had given us some praise for one of our engineers doing a good job. And he was just such a happy client that we felt the need to get him a muskie fishing expedition on Milwaukee Lake, and he caught his first muskie. And that's developing a real relationship, because now we talk all the time. We're learning more about what they're doing and being helpful. That same story has taken place several times in different ways as we listen to everyone's unique needs and who they are as human beings. We are passionate about what we do. We wouldn't come into work every day if we weren't. We do try to have fun every day. One of our stand-up calls recently, we spent the first 5 to 10 minutes telling dad jokes. We're still trying to find ways to have fun every day, even in this virtual environment. And we're very open and honest when we communicate both internally and externally. For lack of a better way to say this, if we have to tell you that your baby is ugly in an IT kind of sense, we can do that candidly, nicely, of course, but we want to recommend the best foot forward for your organization from an IT perspective. And sometimes that means saying what you have in place might not be the prettiest or best solution. We want to be very forthcoming about those conversations. And in the middle of all of that, as our tagline says and this webinar says, is ensuring client success, which is why we have a few people with my title on our team, Client Success Associates. And that really extends to your clients and customers when we think about what it takes for them to do business with you. That's what it kind of boils down to, or distills down to. Just some accolades for us that we're proud of. We've been in business. This is our 16th year in business. We've never lost a client's data ever. So 0 bytes lost since we've been in business, and we hold on to a lot of data. We deploy a program called Safety Net for those backups and recoveries, and knock on wood, it's never happened. So at least not on our watch, right? We also deploy something called the Net Promoter Score. So after this webinar, or if you've attended others, that's something that maybe you have seen. If you've ever heard of anybody doing a project with us, at key intersections, we deploy the Net Promoter Score, which is on a scale of 1 to 10. It's one question: how likely would you be to refer SWICKtech to a friend or colleague? And if you're less than a 7, you're a detractor. If you're a 7 to, I believe it's 7 to 8, you're a passive. And if you're 9 to 10, you're a promoter. And so our promoter score is a world-class score, and that's measured across all avenues of our business at key intersections. And as a result of some of that work, that helps us have continuous improvement. It's a great feedback loop for our clients to tell us what we're doing right and wrong, so we can learn from that, both from a process side and a human side. And in 2019, we did win the Small Business of the Year award from the Waukesha County Business Alliance, which is just really cool. We're really happy to accept that award and be there. Back when you could be in a big gathering in a room full of people. So things have changed, but we do also like to start with why. If you've ever followed or heard of Simon Sinek, This is a common practice for how to look at things. Rather than telling you what we do, how we do it, and then maybe solicit some sort of response, we'll work from the inside out and explain why we do what we do and go out to the what. So that will be our driver for this presentation. I'll just read the screen as you can, but we do believe all companies have the potential to grow when they embrace evolving technology and an IT team who puts relationships in the future first. Look, we don't want to sacrifice the future state of what your technology could look like for the present, right? If we can help it, that's where we come from, and that's how we do a lot of our strategic planning and stuff, which we'll get into briefly here. But just a fun kind of aside on the rate of change to kind of give some perspective here. Obviously, this is saying it's 1900 and it's Fifth Avenue in New York City. I always like to challenge people to try and find the car. Obviously, I can't see anybody pointing at the screen in the webinar, so I'll help you out. It's right there. And if you look here, that's it. There's no other car. And if you scan this image, maybe you might find one or something like that. But if we fast forward 13 years later, apparently cameras got a lot better in 13 years because the quality of this picture is significantly better. But there's your laggard. There's the one person that didn't want to adopt the automobile back then. And obviously I'm being a bit egregious in my example here, but change happens fast. And 13 years doesn't feel like a lot of time, but back then that was pretty quick adoption. And things change much more rapidly today. I'm a 1980s baby, so I do remember Microsoft DOS, and I remember AOL Online and the whole ecosystem that they had built. I remember when the iPhone came out. I remember everything kind of shifting to cloud, as I talked about with the application that I've developed. And now we're in like this new voice thing where you can talk to your car on your phone and the speakers in your house. And I threw Teams in here at the end because that's had some of the biggest adoption throughout all of COVID in the last 8 months of this year, when they went from 40 million users to 7 million users or something crazy like that in very, very, very short order. And so when we look at the verticality of the lines towards the right of this graph versus the ones on the left, and the coloring is really close, so it's hard to see, but if you follow the adoption curve for TV or telephone or electricity, it took a long time for those things to become widely adopted, and some never even got fully adopted. However, if we look at like the smartphone or social media and things of that nature, the adoption rate for those things are seemingly overnight. So that 13-year stretch that we saw with the automobile, that's happening much, much quicker now. And I only call this out to make a point that, IT, at least it shouldn't be a barrier. We say it's not a barrier and it shouldn't be. You can go faster with IT than without it if you're leveraging it the correct way. And to me, I find it fascinating that the word no is in the very middle of the word technology. And in a traditional sense, I've often heard people joke that IT is the department of no, where you would not want to bother IT to get something done because it means that you're going to have a lot of red tape and hang up and bureaucratic stuff. And like, what about this system and that system? And we got to deploy it. And what about the security? Look, if you can level set things, stabilize your network and build a proper framework around IT and the right foundation, you're in a very strong position to just simply turn knobs and dials and go a lot faster. And so with that being said, one of the quotes that gets tossed around our office quite a bit is "Chance favors the prepared mind" by Louis Pasteur. And so if we're prepared for the future, we can take advantage of things that might occur and pop up, or we can pivot and move much more nimbly, whatever word you want to say there. And that brings us to how is SWICKtech doing this stuff? What is our approach, right? And we believe in an organizational IT approach. So everything we do, given our best foot forward, we try to stem from strategic planning, and that is our base and our foundation. So with foundation being on the base, with strategic planning being the foundation on the base, once we kind of plot the points on the map and we start to create that visual roadmap of where we're going, and we're aligning IT objectives with the business outcomes that you want to have achieved, now we can start building projects and infrastructure on top of that. And once those things are deployed, we can help support those things and make sure you're in a strong position for that too. I've heard of companies that have deployed, Microsoft Teams as an example. Internal IT has done it, or maybe an outside consultant has done it, and then they go on, wash their hands, and go to the next project because that's what they do. They have projects to do, right? But then the team is left without any sort of support, and maybe there wasn't a strategic plan put in place. So Another example might be that someone didn't realize Teams could be a voice solution. So they unfortunately upgraded their phone system right before they deployed Teams, not thinking they could save a lot of money in the economics of going down that path, right? So we always want to be looking to the future to inform the strategic plan, to then inform the projects and make sure we're able to support you. So this triangle could also be a circle, right, that loops back around. And when we think about strategic planning, you know, it's one of the first areas that we like to visit, but it's often the hardest to dedicate time to. You know, if the other two areas are not under control, if you don't have good support in place and no one's doing a good job with the projects, you can't really spend time here because all your time is on the other areas. So the purpose of strategic planning is to work with business management and owners to understand the vision and goals for the organization and align the technology decisions with those objectives to put the organization in a position to fully leverage their investment in technology. So, I mean, just to sum that up, like, it is hard to dedicate time towards. Some folks call that working in the business and not on the business. But we want to align those things and leverage the investment in technology as best as we possibly can and be very strategic about it. An interesting example about this, one that came to mind when I was building this presentation, was, which it feels like a lifetime ago, but January of 2020, I think it was actually January 21st of 2020, if I'm not mistaken, Windows Server 2008 and Windows 7 operating system were being deprecated and end of life. So those particular conversations, SWICKtech was having them up to 2 years in advance with some of our clients, where we were saying, hey, in 2 years, this is going to happen. Let's start planning for it now, both from a budgetary standpoint, but also that's just a lot of work. If some of our clients had 300 endpoints that were on Windows 7 in some cases. And so either you have a good kind of refreshing lifecycle where you have groups of PCs and you're following that lifecycle, and that's something that we can help deploy too, is having a lifecycle of change, so it's never this big foul swoop, which could be challenging. In some cases that was the case, but in the scenarios where we had good strategic plans in place, like, it was just simply turning over and getting to the last phase, and it was no big deal, right? So, you know, I've heard horror stories of companies coming to businesses and saying, hey, this thing is end of life as of yesterday. We need you to change right now. It's going to cost this. And it's a big panic and it's a big investment and no one's prepared for it. And it's suddenly this big alarmist thing that no one saw coming. But, you know, it's kind of like budget planning. We know Christmas comes every year, right? So why would we wait till December 21st to buy all of our gifts if we can budget for it in January for the following year? It's not a surprise, right? So we look to the future because we're living in this world every day, all day. And we're fielding these tickets and requests, and it's our job to have our eye kind of on where the future of technology is going and what the state is there. So I'm just looking at my screen to make sure I'm not missing any questions that might have come through. And as we go kind of through what some of those projects can look like that I talked about that we build on top of that, just to give some sort of flavor of what that is that we do, whether that's servers and virtualization of servers or cloud migration. We've even helped some of the businesses that we work with that do work for the DoD put their servers into Microsoft Azure Gov, which is a highly regulated and secure, compliant environment that meets certain requirements for doing work with the government, as an example. But also, as things shift to the cloud, the need for a strong, reliable network infrastructure is critically important. I'd argue it's more important than it ever was, because now you're leveraging that connectivity to go out to the cloud, and that pipe needs to be big enough to handle the bandwidth of all of the users migrating all the files through there, etc. But we're versed in other things like SQL, like I had mentioned, obviously Microsoft, Cisco, Dell. Our Dell partnership, it's a gold Dell partnership. I don't know that any other MSP in this region can beat us on prices, so we like to extend and leverage our partnerships to provide further deeper discounts for our clients and warranty support and things of that nature. It puts us in a really strong position when we deploy projects and things like that to then support you after the fact, right? But even if it's like architecture, support, implementation, you know, if you're moving to a new building or you're expanding your existing building, you know, we have these IT checklists that we can help you go through. If you're doing a merger and acquisition, it's another checklist we can help with, making sure the ducks are in a row. There's a lot of areas where IT should be a very big consideration of things, but it's often an afterthought. And for us, because it's the world we live in, it's the most important thing for us all the time. So, you know, we can always put that best foot forward and put a good lens on things. When we think about the project life cycle, we had a client that I think I have another slide here that kind of goes through this a little bit more methodically. We had started with a strategic plan, right? But their need, we had to kind of make it into a strategic plan. So let me kind of back up. They wanted to get out of Exchange on premise at one point. And so their initial short sight on that was we need to, migrate our email. And, so we kind of helped plot this roadmap out, and we did that, and then we helped kind of get them into Microsoft Teams and Office 365 and leverage all these other tools that come along with that, so they could fully leverage the cloud. And as it stood, we learned that their back office and front office had a need to communicate together, so the sales and operations could work together. So once they had Teams deployed, we could integrate Power BI, which is Microsoft's business intelligence software, directly inside of Microsoft Teams for the various teams. I know it's a redundant word here, so that they could work together and share a visualization of what the operations and sales are doing, and actually link that back to their ERP for their inventory management. And a lot of what we had to do there was SQL based and working with the ERP company to deploy all that stuff, and then integrating it with Microsoft Team and doing some things with Microsoft Flow. But these are all things that we had in our vision where we knew this could go based on what they had to work with. And as it stands, the last plot on the last point that's plotted here is a seamless work from home transition. So when COVID struck, they were already fully adopted to a cloud kind of paradigm, and nothing really had to change for them. It was pretty great. It was a really great place to be when this happened. We weren't in panic, right? So again, that strategic plan approach is really important. And when we do a project, there might be plenty of other projects that come after that, but we're trying to think about what they could be and how it ties back to the original goal, right? And trying to expand the horizons of, well, maybe we need more than just an email migration, right? In terms of the support, when we talk about help desk, these folks are our employees, right? They're staffed here in Wisconsin. I would say New Berlin, Wisconsin. However, if we look around, we have people dispersed now just working from home. However, these folks are the ones that are going to field those calls. They're staffed 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. And the real goal there is to help get your IT staff, potentially if you have them, out of firefighting mode, where they can take on the day-to-day stuff that might get it might crowd their day a little bit, right? It's easy-ish, onesie-twosie work kind of stuff, but if you're working on a bigger objective, it can be hard. So that can really help stabilize that IT and create reliable systems and processes and allow you to focus on the business objectives. And an example I have of that, a couple clients, but one that jumps out to me was, let's see here, I think we want to go right here. So in this particular case, there's a robotics engineering company that, I'm not going to say any client names here, but they're outside of Milwaukee, and their lead engineer writes custom software for clients in their day-to-day. And they were endowed with helping manage the IT and kind of being our liaison, our go-to for some of that stuff. And, it was often before SWICKtech had come on board that they were just kind of handling everything. And they didn't have a ticketing system. They didn't have any way to track some of these things. So even if a break fix resolution was done, there was no documentation of it. There's no way to know if it was a deeper issue. And that person would get pulled from doing their important day job for that business to helping the front desk with something that was seemingly minuscule but important to that person. But now they're being taken away from the job they were meant to do. And as an FSA client, which stands for Full Stability Agreement, they now also set to SWICKtech. That person is fully focused on their primary role. They're a liaison to us here and there, but it's pretty hands-off at this point. They're really quite thankful for SWICKtech, and they tell us that quite a bit, it makes me feel happy to hear that. But we field all of those calls. We have a ticketing system. We're tracking all of those resolutions and identifying any other problems that they might be related to, et cetera, et cetera. And as we follow through here, we think about what it is that SWICKtech is doing, so to speak. We'll take a quick stop at the industries that we serve, and this is just kind of where we've arrived at. We don't do a lot in, at least not today, in healthcare. We do some professional services, not a lot with legal, and we don't do a lot with education. However, I think just by nature of geographic region, we do a ton with manufacturing. So if we're dealing with ERP systems and things like that, and logistics companies, and also food manufacturing. not like restaurants and things like that, but the companies that are actually making the flavors, whether packaging for beverages and things of that nature. We seem to have a pretty strong foothold there. And this map shows the footprint of the clients that we do have. So this isn't showing where SWICKtech is located, but it is showing the areas that we serve, albeit our primary reach and demographic is southeastern Wisconsin and northern Illinois. But we have clients in all of the colored states here, and some around the globe too that are held from bigger companies. And we travel to these locations from time to time to help out if we need to. A lot of the work that we do is obviously remote, but it just kind of goes to show that we do touch quite a bit of the United States here in our reach. One thing I thought it would be worth spending a small amount of time on is disaster recovery. And if we think about that strategic plan again, and we are discussing business continuity as a whole, I use this illustration just to really show that bottom layer, that the servers, the storage, and the network is at the bottom of that foundation. Those are the things that need to be completely stable for everything else to sit on top of. And if that isn't in place and running smoothly or stable, nothing else can really stack on top of that. So it's interesting. This is a weird picture, but a lot of folks think that, I'm never going to have a problem with IT. It's not going to happen to me. It only happens to other people. I've heard that numerous times, but I've actually witnessed a number of other times where I've been a part of conversations, quite literally in the sales process, in some cases where business has been attacked by a ransomware, cryptocurrency, or things like that. It's not pretty. And so I would be remiss if we didn't talk about backup for at least a couple minutes here. And this image, I just like to clarify a little bit the difference between backup and disaster recovery, because they're so closely related that they get a little bit conflated. So backup is like taking a photo of the content in your computer, so if anything happens, it's all safe, right? And essentially you're saving copies of your data at a certain date and time, which could range from a few hours to a few days, depending on the specific organization's practice or whatever it is you're doing. And it's important to have a data backup solution in place, but it cannot be an isolated solution. So if you have if you don't have backup, you should. And depending on how that is working, maybe it's not just like a Western Digital external hard drive that Susie puts in her purse and doesn't actually take home every night. At least maybe it's something, but you want to have something a little bit more robust than that. And when we talk about disaster recovery, the only disaster recovery is actually disaster recovery. So I don't know how many times I've had a client say, or a prospect, I should say, yeah, we've got disaster recovery plan. We back up our data once a day. Well, that does save your data. It's not the solution for business continuity. So if we go back to the business continuity slide and the backup slide, again, they're not completely the same thing. So backing up your data does not ensure that you can access it eventually. But when you have a real disaster recovery plan in place, businesses continue as normal as fastly as they can. The example that I have here, why I'm showing a broken cell phone screen, is just how I think about things. If you save all your personal data to the cloud, music, photos, anything you want to keep, if you think about your iPhone, for example, if your phone breaks, you go buy a new phone, you still have all the data in the cloud. It's all there. You've been backing it up, but only after setting up a new phone, getting the number ported, talking to the people in the store, configuring it for your needs, getting your applications where they want to go, and spending all that time downloading all that information from the cloud. That is the disaster recovery. It's like having a mirrored backup phone that you can turn on instantly, potentially, right, depending on what your paradigm is. So again, just a small quick aside on backup and disaster recovery. It's a very important thing, right? We have 0 bytes lost, so it's one of our accolades that we're proud of that I feel like we have to talk about in any sort of engagement. And we're getting near the end here, so just wanted to say thanks for following along so far here. And when we talk about accommodating preferences, as I go out as an outside salesperson into the market, I get to be the spearhead and hear a lot of things from different businesses, different verticals, different point of contacts, and different seats. And in a few years back, SWICKtech really only had 2 agreements. It's the Essential Stability Protection and the Full Stability Agreement. We've spun up quite a few different things now to accommodate the preferences of the people that want to do business with us. One of the ones all the way on the left here is our Cybersecurity Protection Agreement. That really has been born out of or necessitated by a much more volatile and dangerous world in the cybersecurity landscape. And for SWICKtech, it's been one of the biggest focuses for us in terms of delivering services that can protect our clients. We hold the keys to a lot of castles, and we put forth the absolute best practices in modern technology to protect ourselves, which in turn protects our clients. So that particular agreement is really designed for and aimed at people that are taking cybersecurity seriously. We even have a $25,000 guarantee associated with that. We're that confident in it. Our Essential Stability Protection Plan is really designed for companies that have internal IT and just need the monitoring, the patching, the maintenance, and that kind of overwatch. So you don't have to worry about those things. And there's checks and balances in place there to make sure that, if a patch got done, that it actually did get done, or that it is getting done, and that these systems are being monitored for warranty expiration dates and renewal contracts for different pieces of equipment, et cetera. That's what Essential Stability is for. It's kind of making sure your systems are up and running and working. And then from there, the full stability is very similar to the ESP. However, it's all you can eat help desk. So not only are we alerting you of things that might be critically important to your infrastructure or network, but we're also being the person to have the resolution for that things and rectify those things. So we are fully accountable for IT. If we think of for those that are familiar with the entrepreneurial operating system from Gino Wickman out of the book Traction, we are accountable for IT, right? We can essentially just be your IT department in that scenario. So not everyone needs that though. Some companies have their own IT department and competent people on staff to take care of that stuff. Experts on Demand is a little bit more light on its feet. That really came from a need of a lot of internal IT departments that didn't need a ticketing system, didn't need an RMM solution or antivirus or any of those systems and monitoring and patching. They just needed to have access to our engineering experts for various projects, tasks, and questions and such. So it's a retainer model that gives you access to those people. It does give you an SLA, so you have front of the line kind of access to our folks, and we can be there as those kind of consultants to help with things. Help desk as a service seems pretty obvious. For those that don't have a help desk and just want that portion of it, we can extend our help desk to those businesses under that kind of context. So really, we're just trying to cover the gambit. It's all the same stuff under the hood. It's just the delivery of what's going to make sense for your business, and we want to make sure we can accommodate those preferences. For those that do decide to go forward with SWICKtech, I think one of our two biggest differentiators, without knowing what our competitors are really doing, is our onboarding process. We have a very strong onboarding team. When we go through that, you get assigned an account manager, an engineer from our professional services, and a help desk person from our support services. And what they're doing is they're documenting and capturing everything they can about your infrastructure and your IT and your processes. That goes to hiring and termination. If you're going to hire someone, what's the process that we can document for particular users? What admin credentials do they get through Active Directory? If it's someone in engineering, if they're running CAD versus someone in sales that's out in the field versus someone in HR that's in the back office, their computers might look very different. So we can capture all of that information. So every time that new employee starts in that role, they can just simply log in with their credentials and be into the network, right? Conversely, if someone's leaving the company, if they're departing, who gets the emails forwarded to them? Which person? How do we lock them out of everything? Those are things that we capture in our documentation as well to help make things smooth. We're capturing, again, the warranty expiration dates of things, the product life cycle of things. For the license needs to be renewed for something, we're capturing IP addresses, we're taking pictures. So if someone calls and says, I'm in the server room, you said I need to do this thing or press this button, we can say, no, it's this button to the left below this thing here, because we can see what that looks like because we've captured it. So we're really, really big on documentation through onboarding. And I did mention you get an onboarding team. They are referred to as your high context team. So those folks are going to kind of be your Sherpas into kind of onboarding into SWICKtech. And they kind of bring all that information back to the Hive. So once that documentation is captured, our whole team can be extended to you. And we don't have to worry about if that engineer, Bob, wins the lottery. Oh no, what's happened? He's got all that information in his head. I have quite the horror story of that happening, onboarding a different client where they got locked out of a firewall or a switch, and they called their incumbent IT provider. They didn't have the information because the person that did had quit, and it was all in his head, right? It wasn't documented anywhere. They didn't keep any of that information. As a result, we couldn't get into the piece of hardware that we needed to. we actually, oddly enough, tracked that person down and they remembered the information and it worked, and it ended up saving that client $1,500 in new equipment. So that was a plus, but it certainly could have gone a different direction if we didn't track that person down. And at the end of onboarding, something that, we extend, this is a redacted example here, but, as an example, we show, okay, well, we're onboarding with SWICKtech, so here we are today, right? What we're going to cover is what do we get from the last, few meetings of going through onboarding, and where are we going? And if we're going into the future, we're plotting these points and we're being strategic about it, we even can inform some very rough budgetary estimates so you can plan accordingly. So again, it's not a surprise. And when we get closer to those dates as they're plotted, then we can spin up formal proposals and we can start to, really get everything tightened up and align those business objectives and make them outcomes, right? And leverage that technology. So again, that really strategic plan is how we operate. We look at ourselves as a very well-oiled machine with how we document things and follow different processes through the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS. And I guess that really does kind of conclude the presentation for today. And I did promise that at the end we would share what we'd be willing to extend to the folks that were in this room. We would be offering free onboarding, which is typically around $2,000 depending on the company size. So that would be free, no onboarding costs at all. And then the third month free. And depending on, again, the size of the company, that could be a nice chunk of change. And so we're trying to think outside of the box with how to approach everybody and welcome people into maybe learning more about SWICKtech. If this is something that you're interested in learning more about, you get back to me or send an email back to SWICKtech's marketing team, marketing@swicktech.com. If you can let us know before September 1st that you're interested in learning more about SWICKtech and the agreements that we have in supporting you, that would be fantastic. And if anybody's interested, we'd be happy to send out some SWICKtech thermos mugs. I think what they're called, the tumblers. The really fancy tumblers with the really great SWICKtech logo on it. We'll be happy to send those to you. Obviously, since some folks are working from home, we'd be happy to send that to the business or your home address. Just let us know. We'd like to put that in the mail and as a thank you for attending today's webinar.